This is what makes journalism very, very stressful. Diba? You have to deal with all this shit. You have to talk with people you don't like. In fact, people you loathe.
We came from like an era of essentially vulgarity, peak misogyny, peak rudeness, and it really seeped into the culture.
No, we're not just bystanders reporting on disinformation, reporting on harassment, or reporting on these sides feuding. We're party to it na kasi dinadamay tayo. Ina-attack yung journalists.
Because when you do something right, a good policy, a good bill, we write about it, right? But when you do something wrong, trabaho din namin as watchdogs to call you out.
As the Marcos administration rallies in the back half of its term, the country has seen controversy after controversy with no real resolutions in sight. Today, we examine the state of the nation through the eyes of journalists and how we can make sense of the Philippines. Let's talk about it in today's episode of the Rolling Stone Philippines Roundtable. I'm Jonty Cruz, Chief of Editorial Content for Rolling Stone Philippines. Joining me in the roundtable are journalists Christian Esguerra, Chiara Zambrano, Cepeda, and Bea Cupin. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us, Jonty.
Siguro I'll start na lang with Mara na how would you describe yung state of the nation today? Meron bang like mga welcoming things na nangyari this year, and what do you think are like yung mga real causes for concern?
I want to start with the real causes of concern because I think in 2026, it became very clear that the country is more polarized than ever. Nadama yung buong bansa with the breakup, the biggest breakup in Philippine history between the Marcoses and the Dutertes. Under former President Rodrigo Duterte, it's really, if you're not with us, you're against us and you're against the Philippines. Suddenly, if you're critical of abusive policies, you are unpatriotic or ano bang ambag mo, naninira ka lang instead of kaya ka nag-criticize is because you actually expect better from these elected people, diba? Because you think the Filipino people deserve better. Ngayon, parang if you do not agree with how we do things, you're against us and we're going to deploy a mob online and offline against you.
Do you all see that happening, especially like in the different perspectives that you, I guess, are now in at your point in career as journalist? Like for you, Shara, like as a freelance journalist, like because you're not siguro in a certain like bubble or silo na, do you see what's happening sa national headlines in the day-to-day sa mga nakakausap mo?
It's more like what I see right now is I feel like I'm in the middle of like two very different countries or scenarios, diba? Like we came from like an era of essentially vulgarity. Now where like the peak misogyny, diba? Peak killings, peak rudeness, and it really seeped into the culture, no? The bad behavior that we've all been keeping to ourselves and silently wishing we could, suddenly it became okay for everyone to just be like that. Because if you look up, the guy at the very top and the people at the very top are all about that. So we came from that, and now we look at it at the start. I feel like we all appreciated kind of the quiet that came with the absence of kabastusan. But was there even a honeymoon period? There wasn't. No? Like, what I'm seeing now is like a really deeper, more insidious kind of danger. This is easy to spot. Patayan, dugo, mura, kabastusan. That's all very, very wrong. Pero dito, parang nung tumahimik na, we all got the chance to look deeper again, and then we saw like how bad the corruption has been, not just from this administration, but from wala na sa kwentong tao, it's the entire system na. So it's funny because I was looking at Bea when you asked Mara about the reason for hope, and she sighed, and nag-sad face siya. Sorry. I may be projecting my feelings
Don't be
onto you,
on.
but
Yeah.
it does feel like that sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
whew, it's all tunnel and no light.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the way it feels.
So sige, since you mentioned it kay Bea, do you feel like as a journalist now, it's parang the most hopeless it's been?
Honestly, I don't think we even have time to think about hope because you're in
Yeah.
the trenches. Like, I get the question a lot from non-journalist friends. Like, first of all, it's like, oh, what's really happening? I can only offer you so much information, right? Pero parang, where are we heading? And I'm like, I don't think I can answer that. I think yung isang sobrang striking sa akin na nangyari palace-wise, right? Nag-press briefing, Interior Secretary, the Police Chief, the Justice Secretary was also there. Nilahad nila yung findings ng PNP on the May 13 incident. And then, a reporter asked Secretary Remulla, so anong instructions ng President? Sabi niya something like, the President is appraised, he knows what all the information we have, but there are no specific instructions. And I think that line, it was like a throwaway line, but I think it says a lot about where the Marcos admin is at right now. Ano ba talagang gusto nyo? I-aresto ba talaga natin? Titiklop muna ba tayo? What are the like, and it just adds to the chaos that's happening internally and externally, right? And not even just talking about sovereign issues, external threats. We're the chair of ASEAN in 2026. We're meant to steer the region that's also quite chaotic to solving an energy crisis, the situation in Myanmar. And it's like, how do you do that? When internally, and when by internally, I don't even mean internal politics, like the Duterte, Marcos. It's even within the Marcos admin. Ano bang gusto nyo? And well, he has had several years to figure that out. Parang that was just so striking to me na ang dami nang nilalahad ng opisyal, ng mga police, ng cabinet officials, and then at the end of the day, so what are we gonna do moving forward from the president's perspective? There were none given.
No, but I mean, I think my problem with how President Marcos is handling this government, parang walang nagtitimon eh. It's just ever since he got into power in 2022, cruise control lang. Naupo siya, and then you don't know how he wants to define his administration. It's always reactive to what his former allies, the Duterte camp, is trying to make him react to. Diba? Nag-react sa effects of the Iran war, the effects of another crisis. But it's never really him defining what his presidency looks like. And, that makes him weak. We thought that when he launched investigation into the flood control corruption, that would finally define. I mean, a Marcos scion going against corruption is a different, probably, topic of a roundtable altogether. Pero it still blew up in his face. Diba? Parang you're also wondering, who is he listening to? And why is he listening to them?
Sige, I guess, and I'll ask you this na lang, Christian, but may sense rin na, in some ways, tama naman na ano ba yung gusto niyang gawin. But parang other side, there's a sense na alam niya kung ano yung ayaw niya maging, which is to like, how do I not parang confirm the fears of a Marcos presidency na babalik ba tayo sa from before. So parang, as long as I stay safe here, hindi na ako ma-accuse of what they thought I was. So parang, and thanks, Christian, for being here. Kasi nga, with what Bea said na, it's hard to make sense. Literally, yun yung ginagawa mo sa show mo, na you make sense of all of the
I hope.
chaos.
He
I also
tried.
make nonsense. Oh.
Sometimes kailangan
Huwag
na
mo kayo
yun.
overestimate.
So yun na nga, like,
Pero I think, sorry, this is Marcos na sinasabi mo. I think we're past that eh. Yung kung meron siyang fear that he might be seen as like his father, we're past that eh. He's his own man now, but for the worse, not for the better.
in what way?
Meron kasi akong solution sa frustration sa table eh. Because I can sense the gloom, di ba? And I can understand that. Pag minanage mo expectation mo, mapofrustrate ka pa rin. Pero with Marcos, expect nothing.
Okay.
That
Kasi,
explains everything eh.
Okay.
Wala
So
naman
make
siya
it
pinangako
any
during the
comforting
campaign eh.
at
What did he
this
say
point.
during the campaign? Unity. Wala naman siyang pinarami sa specifics. So, lahat na nakikita natin, this is par for the course. Because they elected someone like him. A marriage of convenience between two of the most powerful and enduring political dynasties in the Philippines. That's why we're all frustrated. That explains it, eh. Tapos yung sinasabi nila Mara tsaka ni Bea na parang ang description ko sa Marcos administration, headless chicken, eh. Hindi alam yung gagawin. 'Di ba basically? Hindi ko na-catch yung sinabi mo na ano, throwaway quote na yun, no, na sinabi ni John Vic na ano yun?
Walang
Walang
instructions.
Pero what was clear during that time was iba-iba sila ng mga
Yeah.
ginagawa.
Parang
The
group
NBI
chat.
was trying to serve the warrant, the ALG wasn't, Malacanang said, hindi. Ano ba talaga, kuya? So, we're not having that direction coming from president. Di ba may kasabihan tayo, you cannot give what you do not have?
But isn't that a tragedy? Because he's the president,
Yes.
right? He's supposed to be better than all of us.
Ay, hindi.
Right?
But I have a running theory
We're not
that
Singapore, eh.
no, but I have
We
a
don't
running
elect people based on meritocracy.
But I have a running theory also na he wanted to be president, but he didn't quite comprehend what it meant to be president. And I think more and more under his presidency, being president means making difficult choices. Sometimes lose-lose situation, pero you just choose the option na the Philippines ideally loses out the least. But it's apparent in public statements and in the conversations we have had with people within or close to the administration that there's always a hesitation to choose whatever decision there is. It's not even the right decision, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, paano mo naman malalaman 10 years from now kung tama ba talaga yung decision? No? I just want to touch also on kahit yung case sa ICC, di ba? Parang bukod dun sa he will be remembered, he could have been remembered as a Marcos president is the one who clamped down on corruption. He also could have been remembered as a president, ironically,
Who sent Duterte?
who sent Duterte to the ICC and gave hope to victims of the drug war na may justice pala. Tapos bigla ngayon kay Bato, kay Senator De La Rosa.
May problem kasi dyan, eh. Let's not assume that Marcos did that. He sent Duterte to the Hague because he believed in
Of course.
justice. He believed in human rights. Kasi kung yun talaga yung belief niya, core belief niya, hindi siya dapat nakisama sa unit team. At kung after nilang manalo, dapat nagtayo ng Truth Commission yan. Pinaimbestigahan yung extrajudicial killings. Eh, nangyari naman yan after mag-break up yung unit team, eh. So this is not driven by any higher purpose or deeper
Core
reason
value.
or core
Yeah, no.
values.
So what drove it beyond politics lang?
Survival, political.
Okay.
Because he needs to eliminate the Dutertes. That's why we're stuck in this muck, diba?
Yeah.
Basically, you're asking about the present condition of the Philippines.
Yeah.
We're fucked up. Diba?
Or what if, to play devil's advocate, what if he is being deliberately ambiguous to let kind of, what's the Tagalog expression, yung maluto sila sa sarili nilang mantika.
That
Yung
is if we
Duterte.
assume na talagang fan siya ni Machiavelli. And I think we're overestimating Marcos. We're talking about someone who had all the opportunities to complete his studies, ginamit yung taxpayer money para makapag-aral, pero hindi tinapos, naglakwat siya, nagbulakbol, tapos meron siyang sense of entitlement na dahil Marcos siya, dapat ma-regain nila yung power.
Yeah, that's it.
And that was what happened. That's a very frustrating, that's a very frustrating situation we're in now.
So in some ways, diba, lahat ng criticism na yan, it's also the media and journalists' role to like push back on all of these things. Ano yung napapansin yung relationship between how journalism is being done here in relation to addressing those things and pushing back?
Okay, start.
Sige, go.
Salam. I don't know whether you guys agree with me, no? Pero I'm very passionate about this, no? Journalism in the Philippines is predominantly timid, mahiyain, and that has to do with our culture as well.
Pakikisama.
Diba? Nahihiya tayo mag-confront ng mga sources, exceptional yung mga nasa table natin. Pero generally, nahihiya, diba? Sir, may I ask po ba? Sir, okay lang po ba na magtanong? Eh, syempre, nasa press con ka, hayop ka, diba? Like, kapag nagpapaalam bago ka, para makapagtanong. Generally timid, and this got even worse under Duterte during those 6 years. At saka yung ill effect niya, ramdam pa rin natin ngayon, meron self-censorship, which is the worst form of censorship. Parang aso, hindi mo na kailangan sipain para gumanon, diba? Kasi siya na mismo takot, eh. Ngayon, meron tayong konting respite dahil hindi nagmumura yung presidente, at least walang late night press conferences. Gibberish pa rin siya, impromptu, pero not like Duterte na talagang parang sabog, di ba? Sabi ko nga sa kanya before, para siyang Salvador Dali, eh. Yung stream of consciousness, kung anong pumasok sa isip, di ba? Sasabihin. Presidente yun, ha? Kung tambay lang, okay lang. Hanggang dito man tambay, that's fine, eh. Pero yun nga, kahit pa paano ngayon, we're seeing a lot of pushback, and that's what's good, no? Maraming mga investigative report about Martin Romualdez were also being critical about those fake of those content creators claiming to be doing journalism. We're very critical of this shenanigans in the Senate, di ba? Mas nako-confront natin as members of the media, whether ano ka, mainstream, alternative, or individual content creator, mas napapanagot natin sila. To cite a very concrete example, si Lauren Legarda. For those who are old enough to know,
Oo.
hindi ka na magugulat doon sa pag-switch
Yeah.
ni Lauren Legarda, 'di ba? Knowing her. Pero ngayon yung mga mas bata, mga journalists at mga tao, ano sila, yung very surprised, no? And nadidistract ako, tinatapakan ni Sharon pa ako.
Kaya, akala ko yung,
Akala ko galit eh.
sorry, hindi kasi
Baka
mapasya
nasapian
dito
siya
sa-
ni Lauren.
Maganda yun kasi, hindi ka na dumadaan sa usual, tawag dito, route, di ba? Let's say you want to criticize someone, I'm talking about just about anyone. Siyempre, pag journalist ka, dapat meron ka pa rin mga standards. Pero napapanagot, di ba? Imagine mo si Lauren Legarda, na-imagine mo ba na nung nag-switch siya ng partido para makatakbo for vice president dahil hindi siya umubra sa partido niya, kung may social media nun, siguro mas na-confront siya ng time na yun. Pero
Na-cancel
ngayon,
na
lumipas
siya.
siya kumabay kay Cayetano, well, she deserves it.
So in that sense, diba, because you're all covering politics, and yun na nga, parang in some ways, it's also about maintaining relationships na para mapayagan ka sa Malacanang or para makuha mo yung interview with this politician. Ano yung balance nun for each one of you? Like, how do you maintain parang the goal of journalism but also making sure you have stories to tell and you have access to
You mean
those stories? Oo.
That's the challenge. How do you maintain access while getting the right stories? Problema kasi pag nag-cover ka ng Malacanang, kailangan mo ng access. Hindi pwedeng lahat mag-cover eh. Kasi iba nagpapachami. And sa akin nga, of all the beats I covered, pinaka-ayoko Malacanang eh. It's the most boring to me. Ang impression sa journalism kasi niyan, parang pag nag-cover ka ng Malacanang, para ka ng
You
presidente.
made it.
Yeah,
Parang
like
you're
You're in the
that.
room, kumbaga.
But it's boring eh. Especially pag fresh grad ka na, nag-cover ka ng Malacanang, wala ka pa network of sources, dependent ka nun sa press con, pagalingan na ng anggulo. Makakasama rin yung mga tamad na tinubuan na ng ugat ng mga reporter na hindi umaakyat sa press working sa press room. Nakikinig na lang, di ba? Nagtatanong, ano yung balita, ano sinabi? It happens, di ba? Alam niya, kaya ka natatawa, di ba? So, yun ang challenge dyan. Ang problema kasi, this is what makes journalism very, very stressful. Di ba? You have to deal with all this shit. You have to talk with people you don't like. In fact, people you loathe. Diba? Ako hanggang ngayon, diba? Medyo maraming umiiwas sa akin ng mga dati kong kino-cover because they see me as anti-Duterte. Ako naman anti-demonyo lang naman ako, diba? Kung may pangalan na Duterte yon, it's just as a consequence. At na maliwanag sa akin yung mga values na pinupush ko eh. Pero yung access niya, kailangan mo talagang kausapin yung mga taong alam mo nagsisinungaling eh. Example, very concrete example, si Alan Peter Cayetano. How do you interview him face to face when you know he's lying? And while lying he's quoting the Bible. Kung yung Diyos nga na makakapagsalita, siguro sasabihin nun, nagamit mo na naman ako, Alan. Anak kita, pero siguro may hangganan yung paggamit mo sa akin. Yung Biblia, sagrado yan. Huwag mo naman laging kino-quote. And that's very challenging for journalists.
Yes. Ang struggle din from friends who are covering specific beats, diba? Siguro, we hope that you also understand the balancing act that journalists need to do na parang tinatanong, bakit yung foreign reporter nakapagtanong ng ganito kay President Marcos about ill-gotten wealth, but hindi ginagawa ng Malacanang press corps? And it's really because even if they want to, the questions are being vetted. And may risk na pag may tinanong na specific question, baka matanggal yung accreditation. Then, hindi ka na makakapag-report. And it's very difficult. And I'm sure it's a frustration by people in MPC as well. Na it's not that we're not asking, we are trying. Pero pag sinabing, wag yung tanongin yan kasi hindi nyo matatanong yung ibang more pressing questions kasi kailangan mong umere mamaya. Diba? How do you balance it out?
That's true, pero minsan kasi, meron din kasi talagang, tanggapin natin yung reality, maraming timid na mga journalists na nagko-cover ng Malacanang press corps. Yung parang nagkaroon na sila ng Stockholm Syndrome. Na kahit sino nakaupong presidente, para bang ma'am, sir, yung para bang naging subservient sila sa Malacanang. Tapos enjoy siguro yung perks of covering Malacanang, di ba? Yung nakakapag-cover ka abroad, di ba? Nakakapag-selfie ka while covering the president. Ano yun eh, it eats into your system as a journalist. Pero I understand, no? Iba kasi yung treatment pag foreign eh. Di ba? Minsan din, yung presidente kasi hindi alam eh, no? Na tatanungan siya ng diretso ng foreign media eh. At example, yung sa podcast niya. Imagine a president doing a podcast. Imagine nyo ba yun? Tapos siyempre 'pag slow day sa Malacanang magbabase ka ron sa sinabi niya sa podcast. That's a very controlled environment. Sino mga pinipili niyang mga journalist na magtatanong sa kanya? And I suppose very screened yung mga tanong dun, 'di ba? Kunwari hindi puwedeng any one of us mag-volunteer, "Mr. President, puwede bang kami naman magtanong sa podcast?" Nakakahiya yan dahil imagine mo babarahin mo yung presidente, tatanungin mo, "Mr. President, nagbayad ka na ba ng estate tax? Ang dami nating kakulangan sa pondo ngayon, 'di ba, nagbayad na po ba kayo?" Imagine mo tatanungin mo sa podcast tapos ipo-post-produce nila yun, yung content na yun. That's what's
Lalabas
challenging.
Yeah,
RTM.
pero it's not
Oo.
about na pahiyain mo yung Pangulo. Pangulo siya eh. 'Di ba? You expect him to take care of the Filipino people na every decision he makes in the air-conditioned rooms of Malacanang para yun to make sure na si Aling Bebang sa Kanto sa Tondo, single mother of 3, makakakain ng 3 beses sa isang araw. And sana may ganong appreciation regardless of who the president is, na 'pag nagtanong yung reporter, hindi dahil gusto namin kayong pahiyain. Ang hirap na kayang maging critical ngayon. Merong mass of trolls that will go down at you. A lot of journalists have gone to therapy because of the effects of that. So we don't do it because it's fun. We do it because we believe the Filipino people deserve better.
And this problem isn't just in the political beat.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is the curse of the beat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where you have to court the source to some extent.
Yeah.
Otherwise, hindi ka papasukin sa gate, wala kang storya, mapapagalitan ka. And I'm in the defense beat, was in the defense beat. So I experienced this as well. Like, how far do I push this kind of warmth towards you? At which point do I step back? But I think dito papasok yung importance nung the outfit that you belong to, the editors that you have. Because if you live in fear of losing a job or losing a post, or when you go back to your newsroom, papagalitan ka na bakit nagalit sa'yo si source mo, then that creates timidity.
Right.
That traps you in between two sources of power, neither of which you now belong to, diba? So if the editors, if the newsrooms give you that instruction, ask the hard questions, kung tanggalin ka, papalitan kita ng iba, lilipat kita dito. Or if you wanna keep trying, go ahead. I feel like that would make a big difference in terms of empowering the journalist. But yun nga, unfortunately, from what Ian said, a lot of people fall into that trap of the beat. Na I just need to get through this day, and I also need to be able to come back in the next day,
one
and the
piece.
next day. So if I need to call you sir, and if I need to say sorry, I will. If I need, pag sinabihan mo kung wag mo itanong yan, sige, hindi ko na lang tatanungin. Baka bukas na lang, which will never happen.
May isa akong experience before, no, nung nagko-cover ako ng ganyan. Parang I was able to categorize and distinguish between sources who can be reasonable kahit galit. Hindi pong basta na-realize nila that you're fair,
They will.
that you're not partisan. Kahit ang sama nung, hindi masama, may very, very difficult na tinanong mo sa kanya or he felt na pahiya siya sa story mo, eventually kakausapin ka. Meron silang healing process. I guess I had a very concrete example, hindi ko na babanggitin yung politician, no? Yun yung pag nababanata ko in-over kayo sa campaign, eh. Ang daming articles na sinulat ko ron, tapos critical sa kanya. Kasi convicted of plunder yun, eh. Si Erap.
Di na na-please.
Convicted of plunder, eh. Pero ano yan, na-realize ko siya, hindi napipikon yun. Ting lalabas yung story sa Inquirer, pati sa ABS, dinescribe siya na convicted plunderer. Miski hindi ako nagsulat, tatawag sa akin yun. Hey, Christian, bakit plunderer ako dito? Minsan biniro ko, sir, di ba convicted naman talaga kayo? Plunderer. Pero pinardon kayo. Tapos may mga stories na hindi niya gusto. Pero after a while, kailangan mong kunin yung sa iya, tatawagan mo. Bubungangaan ka muna siguro mga 3 to 5 minutes. Pakinggan mo lang, and then eventually, makukuha mo na yung quote na kailangan mo. So may mga ganung mga sources na na-maintain mo yung access kahit ganun, eh. Pero talagang titiisin mo yun. Diba?
Yes. Kasi yung goal mo as a journalist is not for the politicians or the tycoons or the officials to like you. Hindi naman kami PR people. Our goal is for them to respect the work that we do.
Yeah.
Because when you do something right, a good policy, a good bill, we write about it.
Yeah.
Right? But when you do something wrong, trabaho din namin as watchdogs to call you out, to make you accountable. And I also have appreciation for politicians in particular, elected officials na alam na mahirap kang magtanong pero sasagutin. Tas may mga ganyan din ako moment, minsan magte-text na the next day, parang, "Oh, itong sentence na 'to, Mara, parang nakakahiya 'to for me." Tas yun, may healing process din, tas maya-maya meron ng tito joke na ise-send about UAAP basketball, 'di ba? So, okay na siya. Pero walang attempt to make you change your story or make your angle. I-express lang nila na hindi sila masaya sa story mo, but they see the value of it. Siguro mas din sila na, "Oo nga, mali yung strategy, talo kami. Talo kami ng eleksyon, eh."
So kung ganun, maybe parang cringe yung term, but like yung because medyo intense nga yung daily grind na ginagawa niyo in dealing with whoever that you deal with. Like ano nga yung point nung ano yung root nung burnout niyo as journalists and
Ba't ina-assume mong burnt out
Oo nga.
ako?
Oo
I
nga.
mean, read the room.
Do we look tired, Jonty? Kaya pala may pakape, ano?
What gave it away?
Medyo red flag kung may tao hindi burned out. Na parang
Okay.
masyadong,
Nice save,
masyadong
nice save.
masayang tao to ha.
Dun same.
But yung sa inyo ha, like you, Christian, you mentioned yung tiis. Yun ba yung parang pag nawalan ka na ng pasensya or tiis, yun na talaga yung something needs to change?
Ito, this is not meant to glamorize or romanticize this field, no, this job, this profession, but it's really different, eh. Either you have it or you don't. Of course, you can learn journalism, but you have to adjust your state of mind. Hindi pwedeng papasok ka sa industry na wala kang sense of mission, na wala kang higher purpose. Kasi otherwise, you might stay for the next 5 years or siguro even 10 years, pero that's where burnout sets in. Kasi nakita mo, hindi naging maliwanag yung goal mo, eh. Hindi maliwanag yung purpose mo as a journalist why you're doing this. Mukha siyang madrama, 'di ba? Mukha siyang pang classroom discussion, pero that's true,
Yeah.
'di ba? Now, that said, talaga may mabe-burnout. Darating yan, 'di ba? I've been doing this for 26 years, napansin ko yan, eh. After 5 years, meron kang mararamdaman. After 10 years, may mararamdaman ka. After 15 years, parang isip mo, parang nag-stagnate na ako rito. Ano ba pwede kong gawin? Mabo-bore ka na, eh. Especially if you started feeling comfortable with your beat. Yung kabiruan mo na yung mga kasama mo, para isipin mo, ito na gusto kong gawin. Pero ang problema, hindi ka nag-grow, 'di ba? Ako na-realize ko, no, when I went independent, sabi ko, na-realize na gusto ko pa rin 'tong ginagawa ko because this is the only job I've known. Kasi nandun yung ano, eh, alam niyo 'to, no, journalists would know this, yung merong switch. If there's a big story, kahit anong ginagawa mo, nag-aalaga ka ng bata, nanood ka ng sine,
Correct.
nakikipag-date ka,
Yeah.
nagpaplano ka para sa crush mo, makakalimutan mo yun, eh. Hindi naman yung anak mo, no? Pero
Sana.
magsi-switch, eh.
Mafe-feel mo parang FOMO ka, as the kids say, na parang wala ako dun, gusto ko, I wanna be part of it, I wanna be able to make
Tapos
sense of
tumatakbo
it.
yung angulo sa utak mo. Tapos nakikita mo, ito yung mga kakausapin ko. Pag nakaus ko tong hype na to, ito yung tatanong ko sa kanya. So, doon ko na-realize na, ay, hindi ako burnout. Na nandun yung apoy, eh. So, every journalist knows that.
Kayo, like, how do you deal with that? Na parang, is it as easy as like seeing a story tapos nag-ignite or does it take time rin to like, yun nga, may healing process as they say?
I think part of it is also accepting that it's okay to burn out from time to time. Tapos parang you take a step, and ito yung one thing that I always think about also. Hindi ikaw yung hero.
Yes.
Main character ka in your own story, obviously, who else is? But you're not the main character in Philippine journalism, all caps, right? Ang dami mong colleagues who will pick up the slack, who will bring the story forward. I think there also has to be cognizance of the community of journalists. Tapos to connect to what Chala said earlier, no, yung parang important yung institutional support.
Yeah.
Your
So much.
newsroom, your colleagues. Kasi nga parang hindi rin pwedeng may hero mentality ka na ako lang makaka-report ng storyang ito. May times na oo. Pero you have to accept also that you have your physical and mental limitations. And you have to trust that your colleagues can move the story forward while you heal, frankly. That being said, I think for better or worse, to survive as a journalist, especially in the Philippines, kailangan yung baseline mo has a touch of chaos. And it's not just for extreme circumstances. Like, daily grind lang na kunwari, hindi ako TV reporter, kunwari nakatayo ka na, tas biglang bumagsak yung signal or whatever. You have to think of a plan B, ura-urada. I mean, that's a kind of baseline chaos na you have to figure out on the fly. Or like, you're covering a rally, tas biglang may sumulpot na official na hindi mo in-expect na sulpot, kailangan mong tumakbo. You don't know how to get there, but you have to run. So there really has to be, and I think this speaks a lot about the trauma that journalists eventually develop, but there has to be a baseline where you accept or you can possibly thrive in chaos.
Yeah.
Kaya nga minsan feeling ko kung tahimik masyado yung mundo, nakakabaliw tuloy. Na parang, oh my God.
And that's how we know you're
Okay,
traumatized.
sad.
Hindi. Ako, dugtungan ko yun. That boundary, no, na this should be as far as I go. I need to step back. I need to rest. If your heart is in journalism, this doesn't come naturally to you. Because the natural is sugod hanggat kaya. Ay, di pa kaya, kayanin. Again, it goes back to your network, your editors, the organization to which you belong, because you are not a lone wolf ragtag person doing this for yourself. You are employed, and dapat kasama rin siguro sa training o sa orientation sa'yo na iha, pag pagod ka na, pwedeng mapagod.
Yeah.
Sana hindi, pero pwede. I remember that feeling when you're in a beat. There is no off switch. You're in the movies, you're on vacation. Alam mo yun, nagsisnorkeling ka sa Boracay. Iniisip mo may gera ba? May sumabog ba? May rival network na ba na nasa Mindanao ngayon habang naka two-piece ako living my life?
Ang
Diba?
detalyado nun,
Sorry.
Parang nangyari
Parang
talaga.
nangyari talaga
Parang
to
nangyari
eh, no?
talaga.
Parang sobrang specific,
Oo eh.
Hindi pa
Nangyari kasi-
pagbukas niya ng cellphone. May tao na sa tawi-tawi, gano'n.
Ganon. That is a journalist's worst nightmare. One of the worst nightmares for you to be caught sleeping on your job.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll on the body and the
Yes.
mind talaga. Yeah. Yan.
For me, it helped that from being in with Rappler for 7 years, aka my longest relationship,
Congrats.
I moved on to the Straits Times. So it's a foreign news outfit. So we don't do breaking, diba? So napunta ko in a very privileged position where my editor will say, it's okay. If you can't do this 5 breaking news at the same time, just focus on one. We'll take care of the rest. So it's very important, the institutional support, right? But it's also important for journalists to develop an identity outside of our job, even if it's our calling. Bakit? Kasi in the last, couple of years since Duterte's time, pag sinabing reporter ka, yung comment section mo, tangina mo, rapin ka namin, pasasabugin namin yung opisina mo, times 10, times 100 for certain people, diba? That gets into your head. Tapos maniniwala ka na, okay, bobo ako, pwede pala akong patayin, I'm stupid, diba? But if you develop a life outside of your work, then malalaman mo na hindi totoo yun eh. That's just all manufactured. So for journalists, it's important. Like for me, it's why I got into my fitness journey, diba? Outside of being a journalist, kapatid ka, asawa ka, ate ka, anak ka, diba? And so you have to protect yourself also. Learn the value of rest. Kasi kaming mga journalists, meron kaming sakit na parang pag hindi kami busy or hindi kami parang we're not productive, we're not doing our job enough. Pero dapat hindi kasi ganun. It's very hard to switch it off. But when you have a support system that tells you it's okay, the world will run kahit manood ka ng sine or kahit mag-swimming ka. Kasi break mo naman, 15 days naman yung leave mo, diba? Pero mahirap mag-let go. Siguro kasi para sa mga journalist, this is a calling for us. This is not a job. Marami sa mga journalists, the right ones, look at this as not as an opportunity for us para sumikat eh. May theologian na nagsabi that the place God calls you to or your life's calling is the place where the world's deepest hunger and your heart's deepest gladness. So for many of us, journalists, ito yun, journalism yun. Hindi namin siya ginagawa kasi gusto lang namin sumikat. But ginagawa namin siya kasi feeling namin ito yung paraan, yung skill set namin, the network we've developed. Paraan siya para maipakita sa ibang tao na ito yung nangyayari sa bansa namin so that hopefully the people who are more powerful, more influential, or more money will be able to address that problem that we're shedding light to. Hindi kami yung storya. Dapat hindi eh.
So, pwede mong replyan yung hater, "Oh, bobo ako, pero marunong mag-high rocks."
I think so. I think, yes.
Parang,
What's your
whatever.
What's your PB?
Half as can you run 1 kilometer.
Ganon.
And I want to move it like more to like the global perspective of these things. Siguro first, it's like when people say nang hirap maging journalist in the Philippines. Sa perspective nyo, nakita nyo ba talaga yung difference in the day-to-day na parang, wow, ito yung buhay ng isang like European or American journalist. Tapos, parang ganun ba ka-wide yung advantage na nakikita mo like how foreign journalists are compared to Filipino journalists?
Depende sa country na tinutukoy mo. Let's say if you talk about Canada, syempre mas malaki sweldo ng mga journalists doon. Koreans, 'di ba, Japanese. But of course, 'di ba, may theory na kung ano yung government and political system ng isang bansa, ganun din yung nagiging media structure. Pag komunista yung bansa mo, di communism yung yung media structure mo. So it depends eh. But based on data, one of the worst talaga yung Pilipinas. Siguro nagna-number 2, nagna-number 3 because of the conditions, and not just because of the trolls, not just because of the disinformation networks, not just because of this angry politicians. It's also because of the pay.
Yeah.
Diba? Dito, may tendency kasi yung mga tao na i-romanticize, diba? Para bang, hindi, calling namin yan eh. Diba? Ang pwede magsabi nun yung journalist, pero dapat ayusin natin yung struktura.
Yep.
Kasi kung naintindihan natin yung important role ng journalism in a democracy, dapat alagaan natin industriya. Hindi dapat pitans yung pagpapasweldo. Would you believe yung mga community journalists, magkano tinatanggap? 200 pesos per article pag na-publish Not because nagsabik ka. Per published article yun sa dyaryo. Paano yung pantawag mo sa cellphone, pamasahe mo? Hindi pa nagustuhan ng politician yung sinulat mo. Na it happens na connected sa family mo. Pwede kang hagisan ng granada. Diba? The working conditions are very bad. Of course, pag sa Russia, iba rin, diba?
Yeah.
Sa China, wala naman journalism doon eh. Diba? Sa US, ang hirap din ng problema ng mga journalists doon because of Trump, diba? So may kanya-kanyang challenges yan eh. But definitely, our condition in the Philippines, one of the worst, especially in those in the communities.
Yeah.
Ito, swerte pa kami dahil we can afford to have this conversation eh. Pero mas malas yung mga nasa probinsya sa totoo lang.
Yeah, being in Manila gives you a little more protection, or at least the veneer of protection. Kasi hindi rin siya totally an assurance. But yeah, like, whenever someone says, oh my God, ang korap-korap ng mga journalists sa probinsya, pero you also have to look at the reality of saan sila kumukuha ng pera. Hindi sila pinapasahod ng maayos kahit ng offices in Manila. So like, parang it's easy to say na, wag yung tanggapin yung pabigay ni Gov, ni Mayor. But like, where else do they get their money? Diba? So, yes.
Oo, tama. Hindi naman gina-justify namin yung practice na yun. Pero you have to be
You
more
have to face the
understanding.
reality.
Kung magko-condemn ka, condemn mo lahat. Pero siguro kung mamimili ka ng priorities, mas i-condemn mo yung mga nasa media na sikat na, ang lalaki ng kinikita,
Tapos tumatanggap pa.
tumatanggap pa, korap pa, nagbebenta ng interview. Yun ang mas condemnable, diba?
And then from the story perspective, like how do you guys see yung global perspective ng Philippines now? Is it the same na parang do they think na the president is inactive or weak, or do they feel like we better off kayo compared to like where we are? How is our local news being seen
Overseas.
internationally?
The thing
Oo.
with President Marcos is magaling siya when he speaks. And when may caveat pa yung magaling he says the right things when speaking before the international community. So, nag-cover kami ni Bea nung ASEAN Summit in Cebu a couple of weeks back. And then there was this foreign reporter who said, no, I think he did very well in the press conference. But when I was asking the people around, the Filipinos around, they're not very happy. And then she was asking, bakit ganon? And I said, that's the thing. President Marcos says the right things before the international community, but as we've experienced now, he can't have a handle on domestic issues, the political issues, right? Kasi he will say overall for sovereignty, protecting the West Philippine Sea. Pero back at home, di ba, nagsa-struggle siya with that. Even as ASEAN chair, right? He's having a difficulty steering the organization into making specific responses to the Iran war, how to address the Thai-Cambodia crisis. He did host a trilateral meeting, but
Medyo default yun.
exactly. There
Kasi
was
you have to.
nothing new. It did not move the peace process forward, especially in Myanmar, diba? Struggle siya. And President Marcos was very very frank in saying na naging mataas yung emotions ng ASEAN leaders. So, he says the right things but parang wala ring laman eh. 'Di ba? Kung titignan mo.
Sige, mga last few questions. I don't think I'll be the first to like disagree naman. Pero in some ways, diba, like, yes, overall, ang responsible yung president. But there's also like parang that common parang saying na kung yung success ng isang cabinet is the success of the president, is there any department or cabinet secretary that you think is like giving a positive light sa admin na to?
Positive.
Oo.
Like doing an exemplary job.
Yeah. Na parang, okay, at the very least, at least this department is making it less hard.
I think to be fair, si Rex Gatchal yan, sa DSWD. Labor, no comment. The ALG, no comment. Diba? DND, what do you think?
I mean,
On the spot ko siya.
oo eh. Just coming from the bar, which was the previous, diba? That's the problem. Everyone looks better because we set the bar, or the bar was set for us very, very low. So even people doing the bare minimum or just showing up on time now looks exemplary. And so I'll be very careful in giving praise for officials who are doing their job. Although I do feel that now when public officials are now coming up to speak to their jobs, sometimes contrary to the people in power, parang natutuwa ako na, wow, now they're no longer parang part of this mob that speaks in this monolithic voice. So yun, di ako mag-name names.
For me,
Cynical
siguro
ako eh.
Secretary Kakdak of DMW, at least in the context of the Iran war. Kasi isa sa mga assignment ko sa ST ay, okay, ilan na yung na-repatriate ng mga ASEAN countries. Pinakamarami yung Pilipinas within the first 2 weeks eh. Siyempre marami pa rin tayong concerns about how the OFW situation is being handled. But at least in the crisis, they're trying to act as fast as they can. But,
Saka we have
Hirap eh,
we
no?
have to, yes. We
ako
don't
kasi
really
yung beat report.
praise.
Ako lang yung beat reporter dito. So I'm like,
How do I?
Mahirap mag-break. Although, just to put it to context, parang we can't view government as like one monster, one monolithic thing, diba? There are really good people inside government doing really good jobs. And sometimes, if they're not aligned with the people in power at that moment, tatahimik lang sila, but they are
Doing a job.
still there. And I really welcome those chances for me to meet the people with lower ranks, but doing honest work. And that's also something to remember, no? And also sana let's take care of those people, because a failed government does no one any good. And
I'll say this. I'd rather not elevate the political appointees, the cabinet officials, but the institutions, because I cover the DFA and the DND. These institutions were critical in at least safeguarding the norms of the Philippines vis-a-vis the world under Duterte, right? Miss Maritez's book and Camila Lemy's book goes into detail further kung paano ginawa yun ng mga bureaucrats, frankly, within these institutions. What I'll say is it's also critical that in the waning years of the Marcos admin, these bureaucrats and even the political appointees, frankly, within those halls, no, they make sure that the transition of the DND and the DFA is smooth leading into the next admin, whoever that is. Kasi if the next president seeks to upend again the norms of the Philippines in terms of how we relate to the world, how we see our defense posture, that can, it's not like the trajectory of the Philippines isn't changing with this president right now, but that will truly 180 pa ba yun or 360, mag-ikot-ikot, paulit-ulit, ganun. So parang that's what I'm personally looking at, like making sure that these institutions survive the chaos, the internal chaos of the Marcos administration now. So much so na by 2028, pag turnover, kung sino man, kanino man ito turnover yung gobyerno, kaya pa rin nila to stand any possible further chaos that could be introduced in the next 6 years.
That is actually very challenging because we don't have strong institutions.
Yeah.
So,
And the sad part is, kung manalo si Sara Duterte sa 2028, 180-degree turn to.
Mga 360 tas 180 pa. Ganun.
Di 180 lang, para hindi babalik sa dati.
hindi, umiikot talaga eh.
Hindi kasi lahat na babalik sa dati eh. Magiging pro-China. DND lahat yan. They will toe the line.
Yes. Yeah.
Dahil presidente yun eh. Di ba imagine yung mga sip-sip noon kay Duterte? Sip-sip ngayon kay Marcos. Sige, Bochodoro, nag-Duterte yan eh. Then he was able to worm his way, for lack of a better term, into the Marcos administration. And I can cite many other names, di ba? The point is, whoever's in power, he sets the tone. Diba? Whether for better or for worse. So pag si Sara Duterte yan, definitely reverse lahat to. Even the DFA, mapipilitan sila mag-toe the line dyan, diba? I remember nung pagkaupo ni Duterte ng 2016, I knew this diplomat, was based in Europe. Diba, bagatin yung bansa. Sabi ko, what happens now? Sabi niya, baka mag-leave ako. I cannot defend yung mga sinasabi ng president at that time. Benign pa yun, ha? Nagmumura-mura pa lang sa mga journalists yun, tsaka sa mga Committee to Protect Journalists. Yun pa lang yung nadidinig na kay Duterte. Minura pa lang yung Pope. Hindi pa yung worse, di ba? Yung barilin daw sa vagina yung mga Amazona, di pa nadidinig yun. Because that diplomat couldn't imagine defending this kind of administration before the international community. But the point is, they have a job to do. Maganda namang ginawa ng mga nandun sa DFA before tsaka DND during the Duterte period. Medyo nabasa nila eh. They knew how to work around Duterte. Di ba si Duterte sinabi, magpipivot na tayo sa China. Diba? Kumbaga, pupunta na siya sa China. Alam mo naman na walang follow-through yun in terms of paperwork. So, napansin nila na pag walang paperwork, buhangalan to. Diba? Pero yung tone nandun. People were believing that that was the case. But they knew how to navigate within the fragile institutions to make sure that won't happen.
We talked about this very briefly lang no, a few weeks ago about the West Philippine Sea. As I remember, a friend sent me a screenshot of the Atenito mission where they were doing yoga on the deck of the ship on the way to the KIG. And he was asking me, how do you feel about this? And the context is that would have been impossible in the previous administration. I've paid a lot of money in therapy because of the all of the harassment that I've had to endure, all because I made that choice to keep chipping away at this wall that they built around the West Philippine Sea. So to see that those walls completely come down and now journalists are being shuttled back and forth across the KIG, parang guided tour essentially, no? And now they're trying to build tourist packages to Tagas Island and ano pa ba yun nandun? People are enjoying, there's concerts, di ba? Adjacent to the West Philippine Sea. It's all nice. And it's really something that we should be doing. We should be free to enjoy and play around in the space that belongs to us. But I think parang the warning I would like to give to people is to safeguard this liberty that we're seemingly enjoying in speaking about the West Philippine Sea. Because I've seen it turn. I've seen it shift from, depende ito sa kung sino ang sunod na mamumuno. Babalik yung pader na yan kung mali ang iboto natin. And imagine, right now, di ba, it appears that there's this escalation in tension, in aggression. Nagkakaputulan na ng daliri, nagkakabasagan na ng salamin, babanggaan. Those are the things we see because we're now allowed to see. Imagine what we didn't get to see in those 6 years. Sometimes I think back to that and it gives me chills. Because every time I go there, I see something horrendous. And I'm only able to penetrate that wall very few times. Like, what else did they manage to do? What else did the previous administration let them do in that area? And okay lang. The West your vote matters to the West Philippine Sea.
Yeah.
As a West Philippine Sea girly, so like, please, let's not go back to those dark days.
So I guess yung final question ko for this, and thanks for being here. I sense na parang may connection talaga yung state of the government with the state of journalism. Like, yung word na timid, you use it for both some journalists and the president. So,
Weak yata yung sa president.
yung weak, sige.
Mas tama yung
Thesaurus
weak.
lang yun. Oo. So, weak tapos timid. So, kayo naman, ano yung, for you, how does the state of the administration reflect the current state of journalism? And I guess, ano yung word that you would describe how one reflects the other?
Sorry, slow motion ako
Thank
pala yun. Nag-iisip.
Baka ito
Nag-sad
complete
face ka.
contrast kay Ian, but because we have a weak president, I'm seeing more and more of my colleagues stepping up. More so than they did during the Duterte era.
I agree.
And nung Duterte time when I was in Rappler, nung hinaharas kami, we really felt at the time na mag-isa lang kami. But now we're seeing na, halimbawa, hindi sinagot yung tanong ni Reporter 1. You see Reporters 2, 3, and 4 jumping off from each other. Probably because the administration is a little less hostile to reporters. And so, when you have a weak administration, a weak president who is really plunging the country into this kind of chaos or is allowing it to fester like that, we're seeing more and more of journalists stepping up because it's the natural thing for us to do.
It's not easy though. Kasi even some colleagues in some beats, they're also just coming to terms. No, we're not just bystanders reporting on disinformation, reporting on harassment, or reporting on these sides feuding. We are party to it na kasi dinadamay tayo. Ina-attack yung journalist.
Yeah.
Tayo na rin yung recipient ng disinformation. Tayo na rin yung recipient ng institutional attacks in order to weaken the institution of journalism, right? And I think it's interesting that ngayon lang ata some circles, some parts of journalism in the Philippines are coming to terms na, oh my God, hindi lang tayo observer, hindi lang tayo tig-record. We are in fact part of this battle or this challenge right now. So far, the response is clarity. I would like to think so, especially in light of the Senate, and the chaos that Marcos is allowing to happen in the Philippines. But I think yung challenge nga dun, again, is if the institutions backing up these journalists who are pushing forward clarity, are the systems there to support them? Kasi lalo na if you're part of a bigger news organization, you can be as persistent and as courageous as you can be. But when you go back home to base at walang support, what can you do, right? You can only push the story and yourself so far. Tapos wala, malalaglag ka sa cliff. So I think that's one thing that we have to think about too, na parang the support for the journalists trying to do their jobs properly. It has to be there.
And ako, prior to, I think we're all in agreement that the Senate chaos really kind of amplified the core of us, no? But ako naman, prior to that, I have been really kind of looking for more. Siguro, to me, the timidity has been heightened. And I think it's for many reasons. I mean, you shut down the biggest, oldest network with the most employees. How do you expect the other smaller networks to react, right? And how do you expect the remaining employees of that shutdown network to react? Yan, punches pulled, diba? Kung level 5 yung suntok mo dati, 1.5 mo na lang muna. Or kahit jab just to create the impression maybe of
Parang siyang residual trauma.
yes.
But I
so-
think it's hard to
it's-
admit though.
But we have to.
Yeah.
Kasi it's a shared trauma that is now affecting how everyone else is acting. I'm really sobrang thankful ako na yung the wake up call that we had at the Senate. But kasi prior to that, I was looking at news stories sometimes, and a lot of it was who, what, where, when. Yung, uy, where's the context? The context is the story. And then you remember the other factors like, tayo, we've talked about this, like the ownership of private organizations. Diba? Kung doon ka lang kung hanggang saan lang papayag yung may-ari sa'yo eh. Hanggang dito ka lang yung sasapak. Or dito ka lang sasapak kasi nandito na yung interest ng amo. I mean, diba? And the journalist has to contend with that. They shouldn't have to. They should be insulated from these internal things. But yun, it's all absorbed and it's all brought to the day of coverage where the reporter is, and you're swimming in that when you're standing or doing a report. Dala mo lahat yun. So, yeah.
Yun, sa akin I totally agree sa lahat ng sinabi nila. Okay na yan.
Okay.
Dadagdag ko lang. Maganda yung sinabi niya kasi dahil alam ng mga journalist you have two types of struggles eh. External tsaka internal. Dapat nakafocus ka na lang sa external eh. That is if you have a proper support system from your own organization. The problem is it's not always the case. Bihira yung mga tulad ng Rappler na talaga matapang yung mga di ba? Yung mga bosses nila. Nung 90s, you had the Manila Times. Yung matino pa yung Manila Times, no? May Philippine Daily Inquirer, nung maayos pa. Mas maayos pa yung Philippine Daily Inquirer before. Pero ngayon, generally kasi, yung political economy of the mass media in the Philippines, kitang-kita mo kung kanino interest yung pinoprotektahan ng mga owners, yung binabanggit ni Chiara. So, limited yung pwede mong gawin from within that system. So, the lesson is, you try to be the best and most relevant journalist that you can be within that newsroom that you have. And focus more of your efforts outside kasi that is what really matters. Kasi mga tao, they won't care naman kung yung boss mo asshole eh.
Correct.
Diba? They wouldn't care kung talagang walang hiya yung may-ari ng company mo. They care about your output.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that is relevant. And maganda wake-up call sa mga journalists ngayon na mas tumatapang, mas nagiging aggressive, nabawasan yung petty competition. Dahil nakita natin, this is an existential challenge or issue involving the entire industry. Dati na bad trip ako in term ko, naging pangkanto na bad trip. Nung binan yung Rappler, napakalamya ng statement na Malacanang press corps. Sobrang lamya. And I heard mas inayos pa yun, di ba? Imagine mo tinanggal yung isang kasama nyo at binan for no valid reason and then napakalamya ng statement nyo. Bakit co-opted kayo as an organization of journalists? Noong nangyari ng panahon nung 90s, may isang inquirer na hindi lang pinapasok sa coverage. Talaga nag-gang up yung mga reporters, nagalit. Diba? Because they knew how important access was. Isa sa Rappler ginawa yung pinabayaan. Kaya umabuso.
Yeah.
Umabot sa point na ABS-CBN na shutdown ng Free TV. Philippine Daily Inquirer tinarget early on. Diba? Natakot din iba mga news organizations. Ngayon, nagkaroon siya ng wake-up call because alam natin to no? Meron tayong parang, I don't know, maybe because of our predisposition as industry, meron tayong sense of passive objectivity. Na para bang observer lang kami rito. Hindi kami pwede mag-comment. Dapat talagang straight news story. That's fine pag straight news story. But the problem was, Duterte turned the media into a beat.
Yeah.
Alam ko yun, kasi sa ABS nung time namin, I was assigned to cover the franchise issue. Nagkaroon ng Friday candlelighting ceremony yung mga journalist. Initially sa tapat ng ABS-CBN gate yan sa Sergeant Esguerra. And then natakot yung mga boss, baka raw magalit sa Duterte, nilipat yung candlelight ceremony or something sa Rotonda, sa Boy Scout. Di sumunod ako doon. Tapos meron signature campaign in support of ABS-CBN. Tinanong ako isang taga ABS-CBN na reporter kasama ko, pipirma ba tayo? Sabi ko malamang. Hindi ka pipirma, tayo nga pinagtatanggol dito. Sila pumipirma, tapos ikaw. That to me was very telling. Na hindi mo alam na paano mo i-cover issue that involves you.
Yeah.
So kahit paano nagising tayo rin Pero the lesson is, this shouldn't be a temporary respite for all of us. Kasi by 2028, pa nagbago yung administration, definitely things would be even more challenging. And the question is, are we up to the task to be able to deal with that kind of challenge? I hope we are.
Okay, thanks to all of you for being here. In-absorb ko lahat yun. But again, I think it's so important na this keeps going nga. Parang the wins, whatever small wins we got from this current admin, sana hindi na siya mawala because we know what is lost when journalism is lost. So, yeah, thanks everyone. And that's it for today's episode of the Rolling Stone Philippines Roundtable. Let's keep the conversation going by following Rolling Stone Philippines on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This has been Jonty Cruz. Till next time.